What dark impulse led to such violence that night?
One of them saw them in bed together.
When the police officer got there to question her, she was surrounded by candles and photographs.
They realized there was something very different going on.
It's unfortunate, it's terrible, but it happened here, and I think it's happened before, and it'll happen again.
October 2nd, 1999, Westlake Hills, Texas. It's early Saturday morning in this suburban community of 3,000, just minutes away from Austin.
It's a very upscale, very low crime area. Unusual to have really very many calls for service at all in that area.
But several hours before dawn, Deputy Greg Truitt's radio crackles to life.
It was like 2:30, 3 in the morning. I was driving just outside the city of Westlake in the Travis County area, and a call came out. A man called 911 saying that he woke.
He said to the operator he didn't know had exploded and his guts were spilling out.
They get the ambulance cruising route. I was very close. Another deputy and I arrived at the residence at the same time.
It's a very nice house. It was an architect-designed house. It was a split level, very nice place on a large tract of land, almost on a hilltop, very secluded.
We knock on the door, no answer. So we began just doing a perimeter check of the house, and sure enough, the first windows and door we come to were the bedroom where the caller was in bed, still on his phone when we got there. I think he was still talking to the dispatchers. And he's clenching his hands over his stomach, which was very large. That's when a lady appeared from the other portion of the house in night clothes.
The man in distress is an Austin media mogul and millionaire named Stephen Beard. The woman, Stephen's wife Celeste, is soon joined by her teenage daughter Christina.
They were asleep on the other side of the house, which is a rather large home.
They heard the sirens and saw the flashing lights. And that's when they learned that something had happened to Stephen.
She just immediately started screaming, "Don't let him die, don't let him die." I mean, just pleading with us to handle the problem, whatever it was.
75-year-old Stephen Beard didn't start life as a millionaire.
Steve grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and not a wealthy family, and he was trained and taught and believed in hard work. Eventually, he worked his way up into advertising, and then eventually he decided that he wanted to start a TV station.
He was a self-made man. He started a television station from scratch in Austin and built it up to be one of the major television stations in Austin, and sold it at a tremendous profit.
After Steve sold the TV station, he became a multi-millionaire. I think the TV station sold for about $54 million. He got about a third of that. But then he also had some nice real estate.
But despite his millions, by 1993, Stephen had experienced his share of hardship.
His wife, the mother of his children, died of cancer.
After her death, he was heartbroken, but his kids loved him and surrounded him. His friends loved him and surrounded him.
One of those friends was 32-year-old Celeste Martinez, who Stephen met during his wife's long illness.
He would go to the Austin Country Club, where he was a member, and have dinner, and that was his time to see people. Celeste was a waitress then at the Austin Country Club, and that's how they originally met. And they quickly went from talking to dating in a very short time.
He was, by every description of his friends, funny and fun. Celeste is a very attractive woman, blonde, bubbly, funny, And I think they just hit it off very well.
They did not date for very long before they were married at the same country club where Stephen Beard had met then Celeste Martinez.
The whirlwind romance caught friends and family by surprise, but the couple didn't care.
There was a major age difference between them, but they were in love. He loved her, she loved him.
He was about 70 years old, and she was in her early 30s. He was very drawn to this person who made him happy and made him feel good.
He was a person who had a big personality, enjoyed life, enjoyed being with his friends and family.
Stephen felt so strongly about family that he formally adopted Celeste's teenage twin daughters, Christina and Jennifer.
This was just something that Stephen wanted to do and wanted to make it clear to them that they were part of his family.
They called him Big Daddy. That was what his co-workers and friends called him, was Big Daddy.
To house his new family, Big Daddy built a magnificent new mansion in Westlake Hills.
It was opulent, and the stone walls, it just felt so safe and secure, just like a fairy book setting.
And Celeste Beard was the Cinderella at the center of it all.
Stephen doted on Celeste, and Stephen loved being able to make her happy.
But now, Celeste's happily ever after has turned into a nightmare.
Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to ambulances and police and finding that your husband, something terrible had happened to him. She was hysterical.
This man must have meant the world to her because the tone of her voice and everything was just so serious and scared, truly scared.
And the situation was about to get even more frightening.
As the medical crew were switching him from the bed to the stretchers for transport, they discovered a shotgun shell in the bedding.
At that point, things changed drastically.
180 degrees from a medical emergency to a violent crime scene.
Coming up, is there more bloodshed to come?
For all we knew, there could be bad guys in this house still.
Police responding to a 911 call from millionaire media mogul Stephen Beard have just found a spent shotgun shell in the injured man's bed.
It came out originally as a medical call. Then they realized that something else was going on, that instead he had actually been shot.
He's alert and conscious and talking to us, and so that's why I just kept going back in my head that, you know, he must have had a surgery and they had split open or something like that. I could see medical equipment beside his bed. He might have had a breathing tube providing oxygen or something. So it just reinforced to me that he was under medical duress.
It did seem so strange that he would call 911 and not have an accurate comprehension of what had occurred to him. He was probably asleep. And it was the pain that woke him up as opposed to the sound of the gun or anything.
Beard's wife Celeste and her daughter Christina appeared just as baffled as the police.
Miss Beard didn't sleep in the same bedroom as her husband.
The home had a wing with a separate bedroom for Celeste, where she slept often, because Stephen had, among other medical problems, COPD, a breathing difficulty, and he slept with a breathing machine. So the first thing that they knew was there were sirens and red lights flashing.
While EMTs rush Stephen to the hospital, police go through the mansion room by room.
For all we knew, there could be bad guys or whatever in this house still. And now we have to do a orchestrated point-by-point search of the house. And at the same time we're checking for bad guys, we're looking for evidence.
Deputies don't find any intruders or signs of forced entry.
It appeared that the door was unlocked, which was somewhat unusual, although people leave their doors unlocked far more often than law enforcement wishes they would.
Jewelry boxes on the vanities did not appear to be pilfered. There was lots of jewelry present. There was closets full of high-end clothing. There was artwork, statues, obvious artifacts and trinkets that would be valuable left undisturbed.
Robbery's not the motive, or burglary's not the motive. They began to think that it was someone who had come there for the sole purpose of shooting Stephen Beard. So if he was the target, then why would it be that someone would target this man?
While CSI processes the house, investigators begin to question witnesses and the victim.
The detectives that respond to the scene, several, go to the hospital and interview Stephen Beard. We had probably 2 at the house interviewing people.
However, none of the witnesses, including Stephen, offer any possible leads.
He couldn't understand why he would be shot. It wasn't like he, upon realizing that it actually was a gunshot wound, that, he immediately gave us a list of people to look at.
There wasn't any talk of having enemies or anyone having idea who would do something like this or why they would do that. He was a respected man in the community, a successful guy, so everything was a mystery.
He didn't appear to be someone who would have anyone who would have some sort of vengeance against him, some reason to harm him. So then you start, looking to see what could this possibly be.
Investigators also question Celeste's daughter, Jennifer, who'd been staying with friends the night of the shooting.
The other daughter came in, that morning. As soon as she was notified, she returned to the house.
She was upset and, concerned about whether or not he would survive.
Jennifer's too distraught to give investigators much information. But as word of the shooting spreads and friends and family gather to support Celeste and her daughters, the shooting investigation takes a sudden turn.
One of the friends approached us and they gave us a name and suggested that it might be something that deserved to be looked into.
They thought that they had a suspect and that it was a young woman who had contact with Celeste Beard in the past.
The woman's name is Tracy Tarleton. And when investigators follow up with Celeste's daughters, they confirm that there was no love lost between Tracy and their adopted dad.
Stephen did not approve of Tracy Tarleton, and Stephen was pretty perceptive about what he thought Tracy Tarleton was after, and that is Tracy Tarleton was after Celeste.
Coming up, did a love triangle become a ticking time bomb?
What we found was that she had, and this is her word, recruited married women who were not happy to be her lovers.
While doctors fight to save millionaire Stephen Beard, gravely injured by a shotgun blast while he slept in his mansion outside Austin, Texas, investigators have just uncovered a possible lead on the shooter's identity.
Someone at the scene that morning voiced a concern about a specific person and provided us what probably was our first lead.
Acting on the tip, detectives take a closer look at a 59-year-old Austin woman named Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy was a manager of Book People. It's a large, very popular bookstore in downtown Austin.
Tracy met Stephen Beard's wife Celeste at a local psychiatric facility several months before the shooting.
Celeste suffered from depression, And she did check into a psychiatric hospital a couple of times, dealing with her problems. And she met Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy at the time had a pretty significant problem with alcohol. And it got to the point where she was feeling suicidal.
Tracy had some legitimate issues that she was trying to deal with.
Her mental health would go, and then she'd start self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And when that would happen, her bipolar disorder would kick into gear.
During their brief time together, the two women became friends.
Celeste felt sorry for Tracy. Tracy's not very attractive physically. Celeste felt sorry for her.
Tracy is funny, and Tracy is bright. I think they had similar sense of humors, that they could get along.
After they were both out of the hospital, they did continue a friendship.
Because of the communications they were having, long phone calls, Stephen Beard realized that Celeste Beard was involved in some kind of what seemed to be a very serious friendship to him at the time with Tracy Tarleton. But he at that point had never met Tracy Tarleton.
That changed in August of 1999, a little more than a month before the shooting.
Stephen Beard decides he wants to meet this person who seems to be such an integral part of his wife's life. Her name's Celeste Beard invites Tracy over. Stephen Beard is friendly toward Tracy, welcomes her into his home, cooks dinner for them.
But after dinner, while Tracy and Celeste are sitting outside, things took an unexpected turn.
Tracy was drunk and trying to kiss Celeste.
Christina sees them kiss, and then she goes to tell Steve what she witnessed. Stephen Beard confronts Tracy and tells her she needs to leave. He's not violent about it. He doesn't throw her out of the house. He tells her she needs to leave, and she does leave.
She had stormed out of the house, and she was arrested that night by the Austin police. The charge was driving while intoxicated.
Now investigators wonder, had Celeste's would-be lover sought her revenge?
Tracy is having these mental issues, a very fragile person emotionally, and she meets Celeste Beard, and she falls in love with Celeste Beard.
Tracy firmly believed the thing standing between her everlasting happiness with Celeste was Stephen Beard.
When confronted by police, Tracy doesn't deny shooting Stephen.
When the investigating officers went to Tracy Tarleton's home in South Austin, she was surrounded by candles and photographs of Celeste, obsessed with Celeste. She turned over the shotgun to him. I suppose she knew that the jig was up, that she was caught.
Investigators take Tracy into custody and then inform Celeste that her friend has been arrested.
It was devastating for her. Celeste didn't want to believe that Tracy had been the one that had done this because she tried to be a friend to Tracy, and she was in denial for a long time until they tested ballistics. You can actually test ballistics of a shotgun shell. Were able to tell that the shotgun shell that was found on the floor of Stephen's bedroom was fired by the gun that Tracy Tarleton had.
While the prosecutors build their case against Tracy, Stephen struggles to overcome his devastating injuries.
He was in the hospital a couple months.
Celeste visited him as much as she could on a daily basis. She had, in anticipation of him being released from the hospital, wheelchair ramps made, looking forward to getting him home again where she could take care of him.
But Stephen never fully recovers from his wound and dies in the hospital on January 22nd, 2000.
The medical examiner said it was caused by pulmonary embolism related to him being shot. Therefore, the cause of death is the gunshot.
Before Stephen's death, she was charged with aggravated assault, and injury to an elderly individual. After Stephen's death, Tracy was charged with capital murder.
Coming up, a young widow goes to any lengths to get a fresh start on love.
We found that Stephen was her fourth marriage.
Then you began to wonder if there was perhaps a more sinister connection.
At the end of February, Tracy Tarleton is in the Travis County, Texas jail, charged with murdering Austin millionaire Stephen Beard.
It wasn't a whodunit. We know who pulled the trigger. It was Tracy Tarleton.
She didn't get rid of the shotgun. I'm not sure that she actually realized that she had left evidence at the scene. So the case against her was strong.
Was Stephen Beard simply the victim of Tracy's obsession with his wife Celeste? Or was there a piece missing?
Our minds kept coming back to this fact of it was easy for her to get in there and that none of the alarms were set in that area of the house and the door was unlocked.
I think there was suspicion from the very first night that Celeste was involved.
She may have played a role in this plan.
Although questioned repeatedly by investigators, Tracy adamantly denies that Celeste had anything to do with Stephen's death.
Even after she acknowledged that she had been in fact the one who shot Stephen Beard, she still didn't reveal any sort of encouragement that she had received, or certainly any sort of coordination with Celeste Beard.
Over the weeks that follow, friends of Stephen and Celeste started reaching out to the investigators, and their stories paint a very different picture of what investigators believed was a happy marriage.
According to the people who were hanging around with her, she was going through a lot of men, entertaining a lot of sexual partners. She was living an extremely extravagant, lavish, single lifestyle.
After Stephen died, Celeste just kind of went crazy. She went on a spree of drinking and partying and going out and making a mess of her life.
You know, going on a trip to New Orleans and other places, taking girlfriends along, hanging out at 6th Street, going to all the bars, just celebrating life.
According to friends, she's also burning through Stephen's millions at an alarming rate.
From the funeral on, Celeste Beard seems intent on squandering the rest of Stephen Beard's estate. It's just a girl gone wild, is what it seemed like after Stephen Beard's death.
Based on her unusual behavior following her husband's death, investigators began digging into Celeste's past.
We found that Stephen was her fourth marriage. She had had marriages along the West Coast before she moved to Austin with her third husband.
Celeste and her third husband divorced shortly before she married Stephen, but according to friends, they continued to sleep together after the divorce.
Celeste would have affairs with her ex-husband, but she said she never thought of it as an affair because she had already been married to him, so it didn't count as an affair.
In addition to the infidelity, investigators also learned that Celeste has a criminal record.
She had been charged with a fraud crime in Arizona, for which she was on probation for, unknown to Stephen Beard at the time they had been married.
Then you began to wonder whether or not there was perhaps a more sinister connection between Tracy and Celeste Beard.
There was no way that we were going to be able to prove a case against Celeste without Tracy's testimony. So Tracy's lawyers from the beginning were hinting around to the prosecutors that Tracy had a story to tell, and they wanted immunity for her testimony. But the DA's office was not willing to give her complete immunity and no punishment.
Once again, Tracy refuses to implicate Celeste.
She was hesitant to make any sort of connection as far as motivation to Celeste.
But would Tracy change her tune after Celeste met a new man?
She met Cole Johnson at a bar where he was bartending on 6th Street. For Celeste Beard, that's kind of par for the course.
He kind of straightened her up, saw that she was being very self-destructive, and convinced her to pull back.
Then, in July of 2000, just a few months after meeting, and barely 6 months after Stephen's death, Celeste and Cole become man and wife.
There's no question, given her history, that she's going to be married again soon. But, ultimately, that was her downfall, and it was clear from that marriage to Cole Johnson. Tracy Tarleton decided that she should come forward and tell the truth.
Tracy realized that she had been used and became willing to tell the rest of the story.
Coming up, the wages of a marriage gone haywire.
Celeste despised the fact that she had to have a sexual relationship with him.
Awaiting trial for the murder of Austin media mogul Stephen Beard, 42-year-old Tracy Tarleton has refused to implicate Beard's wife Celeste in the Millionaires' murder.
She's going to take responsibility for this murder. She's not going to name Celeste Beard as being involved in it. She's just going to take the full rap, but then she's betrayed by Celeste Beard.
A few months after Stephen's death, Celeste meets a bartender named Cole Johnson, and he becomes her fifth husband.
And what Tracy Tarleton provided was the details of the planning and the actual details of Celeste Beard encouraging, aiding, and assisting her in causing the death of Stephen Beard. She gave all the details.
Tracy tells detectives that at first, money hadn't been an issue for Celeste.
In order to make sure that she had access to her own money, he set up a trust fund for her, and he put in $500,000, $500,000 in this trust fund. She just blew through it. It was 6 months that she went through that $500,000. It's not clear exactly where all the money was going. A lot of it was in high-end fashion, stuff that she never ever wore, handbags and dresses and jewelry.
Celeste bragged one day that somebody asked her, "What's the most you've ever spent in one day?" And she said $50,000.
Stephen Beard approaches her and says, "You are squandering this entire estate. You are destroying everything I've spent my life building. I can't be with you anymore." He begins divorce proceedings. Her response to that is like she's going to kill herself. And then she's taken to the psychiatric unit of a local hospital for treatment. And it meets this woman by the name of Tracy Tarleton.
I think Celeste manipulated everyone in her life, including her husband and her children, and then later Tracy Tarleton. And she was able to manipulate Tracy because Tracy was particularly vulnerable.
They right away started some kind of close friendship. I think early on they were very huggy and even kissed.
According to Tracy, Celeste also made it clear that she was unhappy with Stephen.
She despised the fact that she had to have a sexual relationship with him every once in a while.
There was evidence that Celeste had been drugging Stephen, that she would crush up sleeping pills and put them in his food, and that she would substitute Everclear for vodka in his drinks, just have him pass out so that I don't have to deal with him.
And then Celeste would go out and party all night long. And the next day she would be difficult to wake up because she'd been up all night.
Tracy tells police that once they were both out of the psychiatric hospital, Celeste continued to drug her husband and sneak out to spend time with her new friend.
Celeste Beard went out of her way to have contact with Tracy Tarleton and increase this relationship to the point that it became a sexual relationship.
From the prosecution standpoint, yes, it seemed like she was using sex and love to get what she wanted from Tracy. And to Tracy, the love was the important thing.
According to Tracy, Celeste made what she wanted abundantly clear.
It had been kind of planted in her mind that Celeste was being, treated horribly by Stephen Beard, that if he were to be gotten rid of, that she and Celeste could be together.
Tracy's motive was simply love. She loved Celeste Beard. She's never been anything other than totally honest with this.
And Celeste had everything to gain from her husband's death.
He was probably going to divorce her. They had a prenuptial agreement, and any money that she was entitled to related to those agreements, she had already spent.
But if they were still married at the time of his death, she was going to be in a position to inherit his wealth. What Celeste stood to gain was mostly the money.
Tracy says that once she agreed to kill Stephen, Celeste had promised to clear her path.
The alarm system would be off and the door would be open. She could get in and get out undetected.
She came into the bedroom, shot him in the stomach, and then left.
But she'd failed to kill Stephen outright and left a vital piece of evidence behind.
It was a very poorly planned shooting. She used a 20-gauge shotgun with birdshot. The only shell that was fired ejected, and it was left there.
Tracy Tarleton pulled the trigger. The evidence clearly shows that. But the only reason Tracy Tarleton pulled the trigger in this case was because of Celeste Beard.
Once Tracy flipped and agreed to testify against Celeste, then the prosecution got an indictment against Celeste and had her arrested.
She was charged with capital murder. The automatic punishment if you're found guilty is life in prison.
Coming up, a dramatic trial becomes a loving parent's worst nightmare.
Just for Celeste to sit in the courtroom, it destroyed her.
When Celeste Beard goes on trial for murder in March of 2003, the salacious details have all of Austin, Texas buzzing.
You had a person who hoped to be a rich heiress with this lesbian lover who ultimately murders her rich older husband by shotgun. So all those things added up to what was basically for many people a soap opera that they couldn't stop following.
This perhaps mentally imbalanced woman killing out of lesbian love, and it sounded like some kind of made-for-TV movie.
The prosecution lays out their case first.
The evidence will show that what happened here is a simple case of a greedy, manipulative defendant who took advantage of a mentally ill woman who was in love with her.
Tracy would be showing up at the trial to say she pulled the trigger. So the question of the trial was, why would Tracy Tarleton kill Stephen Beard? Was there somebody who encouraged her, aided her, assisted her, who pushed her to pull the trigger? And so our case focused on proving the relationship between Tracy Tarleton and Celeste Beard.
Her testimony came across as very believable because she did not minimize her involvement in it. And she acknowledged right up front that she had committed this murder, that she had done this thing that was wrong, and that she deserved to be punished for it.
She also has some surprising backup.
Both daughters, Jennifer and Christina, testified against their mother.
They really corroborated some things that even Tracy had said, and so it helped to bolster Tracy's testimony.
They understood and witnessed that this was a actual romantic relationship. One of them saw them in bed together. One of them saw them kissing on at least a couple of occasions.
Her daughter's testimony is a cruel blow for Celeste.
He was our dad. We loved him. And you took him away from us.
Celeste was crushed that they turned against her. Just for Celeste to sit in the courtroom with her daughter on the witness stand talking about things that would hurt Celeste, it destroyed her.
But when it's the defense's turn, they claim that Celeste's daughters had their own motive to betray their mother.
The daughters did this thinking that they would get more of Stephen's inheritance.
I think the defense tried to also kind of paint them as, angry teenagers striking out against their mother.
Tracy knew that the defense's whole case also depended on attacking her. And so their strategy was to attack her as mentally ill and delusional and predatory.
We believe that the evidence will show you Tracy Tarleton is not worthy of belief. Tracy was delusional. The delusion was that she and Celeste were lovers. Celeste denied it. Celeste had resisted her advances.
The defense tried to kind of paint her as some mentally unbalanced person who had this affection that was not returned and that she was acting clearly on her own.
Will it be enough to convince the jury that Celeste is innocent?
The jury was out several days. I was very hopeful. The longer a jury deliberates, the more you know that there are members of the jury that have a different view from the prosecution.
Finally, after nearly 3 days of deliberation, the jury makes its decision.
The jury came back with a guilty on capital murder.
I remember her being pretty emotional. She really had thought she was going to get away with it.
Instead of enjoying Stephen's millions, Celeste will most likely spend the rest of her life in prison.
Capital murder is automatic life sentence.
So she has an eligibility for parole, but it's, like another 20 plus years from now.
In exchange for her testimony, Tracy receives a 20-year sentence with the possibility of parole in 10 years.
Steve's family was involved in the decision to offer Tracy a deal. They felt like Tracy is not a person who would have done this on her own.
You have a gentle soul who's pushed to this crazy act of murder. And she causes this death that she's going to have wear on her soul for the rest of her life.
After the trial was over, the family requested to meet with Tracy and expressed their thanks to her for telling the truth and for making it possible for Celeste to be held accountable for their father's death. Celeste loved money. She loved material things. She loved status. And in the end, that was more important to her than her husband, her children, and the people in her life.
She was a wealthy businesswoman in love with a ranch hand.
Kathleen was a very well-respected businesswoman in Vail. Everybody liked her. He loved to laugh, and he just was a good time to be around.
Until their Western-style romance went dangerously wrong.
Please help him. He doesn't deserve to die.
And it's up to investigators to unravel the truth.
He told her that he was a hitman and had killed 32 people.
Guns and drugs is a very dangerous cocktail.
That was the point of no return.
June 27th, 2002. It's a quiet Thursday afternoon in rural Colorado when an Eagle County 911 operator gets a call from a local businesswoman named Kathleen Denson.
She had called 911 to report that she had just shot her boyfriend.
I think it does.
Kathy, you have the gun in your hand.
No, it's on the table.
Kathy, where was he shot?
In his heart. Please help him. He doesn't deserve to die.
Kathy says the victim is her ex-boyfriend, Gerald Cody Boyd, and claims the shooting was in self-defense.
While on the line with 911, Kathleen Denson was nearly hysterical. She didn't want Cody Boyd to die. She did tell the dispatcher that he was demanding money from her, but she was almost hysterical with the fear that he would die.
Police and paramedics are immediately dispatched to Denson's home, located on a sprawling 77-acre horse ranch in Eagle, Colorado.
Vail is about 15 miles up the river from Eagle. It's a very rich ski town.
I was at the sheriff's office at the time that the call came in, so I was actually one of the first officers on scene. As we're approaching the scene, there's a lot of things going through your mind as an officer. Is she still armed? Are there any other people in the residence? Any dangers that we need to be aware of as we're going up to that?
Officers find Kathy outside, still on the phone with 911.
I'll never forget the scene as going in. You could still smell the discharge of the firearm. You can smell the burnt black powder as you enter the residence. And then we went in and discovered the body in the living room. Mr. Boyd was laying on his back when I walked in. He was lifeless, and I could tell what appeared to be a gunshot wound on the left side of his chest.
It's already too late. He is found dead at the scene.
The first thing that I was curious about was what her story was.
There were absolutely no signs of a struggle that we were able to determine at the scene. There was no indication that she had any injuries whatsoever.
Investigators can't help but wonder if there was more to the story than Kathy will admit. From the beginning, Kathleen and Cody's relationship had been unconventional. He was just a simple cowboy, but Kathy had been born into money as the daughter of a successful Colorado furrier.
Her father started that company. She inherited it and grew it.
There's no doubt that Kathleen Denson was a very well-respected businesswoman in Vail. She ran the first store, and everybody liked her.
She actually had not just the store in Vail that was very successful. She had 2 shops in Aspen, which is about 100 miles away. That was a very successful operation, made her a lot of money, and her shops were known for very high-quality merchandise.
But while selling furs became her profession, horses had always been her passion.
Kathleen was also known by the quarter horse set because she had a lovely 77-acre quarter horse ranch, Dragon A.
She was raising quarter horses. That's not a cheap hobby, so I assume that she was doing very well.
Her ranch, I'm sure, was quite well known, and her breeding operation was quite well known. It was her first stores that made her a wealthy woman. If she had positive income from the ranch, that was a big plus.
In the late 90s, she'd hired Cody Boyd to help her run the place.
He had bounced around the valley already 3 or 4 years here, and he had had odd jobs.
What I can remember about Cody Boyd is he had a strong personality. He also liked to have a good time.
He had a bit of a reputation as a ladies' man because apparently he was charming as hell. He just had this kind of just lovely Western drawl, and he had a twinkle in his eye, and he loved pulp stories, and he loved to laugh, and he just was a good time to be around.
Cody had been on the job for a few years when he divorced his wife. Soon after, their relationship became more than just professional.
It quickly developed into a romantic relationship. And then she provided for him, both as a handyman as well as her boyfriend.
As the story goes, he eventually went from the bunkhouse out to the ranch house and started living with Kathleen. Here's a wealthy, beautiful woman with money and land. It must have been an incredibly tempting situation for Cody Boyd.
In some cases, it's the allure and the mystery, the unknown, of really an opposite. So in some cases, the most passionate, fiery love affairs are born of these very different backgrounds.
Despite their differences, Kathy and Cody seemed to be happy together. So how had their romance ended? And why had it resulted in bloodshed?
It's hard to say exactly when things began to go south between Cody Boyd and Kathleen Denson. Cody Boyd convinced Kathleen Denson that he really, really loved her. That's completely at odds with the picture that emerged in the investigation.
Coming up, investigators uncover ties between the victim and organized crime.
Boyd was gregarious, articulate, friendly, but he absolutely had a dark side.
Sheriff's deputies near Vail, Colorado have arrested local businesswoman Kathy Denson for killing her ex-boyfriend, 45-year-old Cody Boyd.
We had a body laying inside the residence. We knew we had a person who claims to have shot the person that's laying inside the residence. So the first thing we got to do is we got to secure that scene.
One of the first things that seems out of place is the murder weapon itself.
She had set the gun down actually on the table in the kitchen.
It was an unusual weapon that she used. It was a black powder gun.
That's one of the oddest things about the Denson case. This was a replica of a 19th century black powder pistol. Hardly the most effective murder weapon out there.
Because it makes a lot of smoke when you shoot them, and there's a recoil, and you have to cock it by the hammer to shoot it, and it's kind of fun to play old-time cowboy and load them and that sort of thing.
It wasn't what you would have used had you had any kind of prior notice that you'd have to defend yourself. In fact, it might have been the last weapon you'd use in that particular home.
But the antique pistol was powerful enough to kill Cody Boyd almost instantly.
Make no mistake about it, that is a very deadly firearm.
Mr. Boyd was laying on his back when I walked in. He was lifeless, and I could tell that what appeared to be a gunshot wound on the left side of his chest.
There was no signs of any struggle or any mark other than the gigantic gaping wound of the half-inch metal ball that killed him.
That bullet pushed through almost, I would say, 12 inches or more of bone and flesh.
Investigators find no evidence of a struggle.
As far as around Mr. Boyd, the decedent, we didn't locate anything of suspicious activity around him. There was no other weapons, nothing else that we had found indicating that Mr. Boyd was armed or anything like that.
To get a better sense of Cody and Kathleen's relationship, detectives speak to friends and other employees.
in interviewing the hired hands there at the ranch and also interviewing neighbors. We're talking to those folks to try to help us paint the picture of what kind of person she is, what kind of person Mr. Boyd is.
They discover that the romance had been over for a while now, and money seems to have been the root of the problem.
As far as we know, Cody Boyd had nothing when he came to know Kathleen Denson. He really fit the role of the misfit, the ne'er-do-well, not someone who was successful in life.
The word was that she had paid about $100,000 worth of his business expenses.
Kathleen had purchased like a motorcycle for Cody, had purchased a semi for Cody. I believe there was a Corvette that was purchased as well. But things started going south.
Friends also point to the drastic differences in the couple's personalities. While Kathy was quiet and reserved, Cody was larger than life and liked to tell stories about his checkered past.
Boyd bragged incessantly about his claim that in his prior life he was a mafia hitman. And he certainly had the guns and ammo to make that seem convincing.
The sheriffs discovered on the ranch a big gun safe. And in the gun safe, there were at least half a dozen high-powered semi-automatic weapons.
You didn't have to be a very good shot. You just had to hold the trigger down and let the 20 rounds per second be expelled from your firearm. A nasty, nasty set of guns, to be sure.
In fact, it turned out Cody had purchased the antique pistol that killed him.
And it was a Christmas gift to Kathleen, who was living out on the ranch, from Boyd. And that's one of the great ironies of this. This was not a modern firearm. And even an original black powder pistol has a significant percentage of misfires. This is not a safe firearm to be firing, let alone being fired at.
It doesn't seem like the kind of weapon one might choose if they were planning to commit murder, which supports Kathy's story. The medical examiner's autopsy report is also in her favor.
The evidence was pretty clear that he was high on cocaine, and the evidence that she would be legitimately afraid of this man with whom she'd had a long-term romantic relationship.
Cocaine is a stimulant, and it acts on the reward center of the brain, the pleasure center of the brain. So the combination of euphoria with impulsivity and the reduction of the ability to put the brakes on can be a really dangerous combination.
Guns and drugs is a very dangerous cocktail.
It seems to be a clear-cut case of self-defense, until a new witness steps forward with a different story to tell. Coming up, Kathy is betrayed by one of her closest friends.
She wanted to let us know that Kathleen Denson is not who a lot of people think that she is.
After the first day of the investigation, it looks like modern-day cowboy Cody Boyd was killed by Kathy Denson in self-defense. However, Colorado police are about to learn that his ex-girlfriend's motives might not have been so innocent after all.
So what became apparent as we continued with this investigation was that it appeared that this was some sort of a love triangle. We knew that they were boyfriend-girlfriend, but then there's also this third person that comes into the picture, Monica Seebacher. She goes by Monique.
Monique was I believe a manager for the Vail store and was an employee of Kathleen's for several years.
Kathleen and Monique were basically also best of friends, and that certainly Kathleen confided in Monique.
However, it seems that friendship had been stretched to the breaking point, and when Monique learns about the shooting, she comes forward to tell Eagle County investigators what she knows.
She was a very forthcoming witness and wanted to be able to tell her side of the story. She wanted to let us know that Kathleen Denson is not who a lot of people think that she is.
He was in love with me, and things just, started escalating from there.
Monique Seebacher said that the reason why Kathleen Denson shot and killed Cody Boyd was because Cody loved Monique and not Kathy Denson. Now, whether that was true, I don't know.
According to Monique, her relationship with Cody began after Kathy kicked him out of the house.
2 years ago, Kathleen told me that her and Cody were having problems, and I had a 2-bedroom condo. She asked me if he could stay there while, maybe they work some things out.
It turned out to be a little bit of a disaster because Kathleen still loved Cody Boyd. And yet here she is shoving him out of the ranch and into the arms of another woman.
She wanted things to work out between them. And instead, he started a relationship with her friend.
The relationship between Seebacher and Boyd was certainly something that she wasn't thrilled about.
Monique says she tried to preserve her friendship with Kathy, but it was clear that she was still in love with Cody and unwilling to let him move on.
Certainly, Kathleen confided in Monique. I think the evidence showed Monique that wasn't always that straightforward and confiding everything back in Kathleen.
It made things very awkward for Kathleen.
Beyond the exterior, which she was effective, she was savvy, she ran a good business, was I would have to say, a pretty tortured personality and soul, and pretty conflicted.
Monique explains that because both she and Cody depended on Kathy for their livelihoods, they tried their best to keep their romance a secret. She confesses that Kathy's generosity came with other perks as well.
All three of them had pretty strong drug habits, particularly with the drug of choice in the glitzy ski resorts, that being cocaine. And she, Kathleen, had the money to keep them well supplied. Basically, she's supporting him and his drug habit, giving him lavish gifts.
She bought him a car, guns. He basically had money to do whatever he wanted.
But all along, what Cody really wanted was Monique.
For Boyd, he had the best of both worlds. He had a woman that he was getting money from and another woman who seemed to dote on him. It must have been an incredibly tempting situation for Cody Boyd.
Monique questioned him, "Why are you still going to see Kathleen?" And he says, "It's just really hard for me to break up with her after all these years." That's pretty unusual, that kind of relationship, and the people involved, they're different. They're definitely different.
Monique says the beginning of the end came a few weeks before the shooting, when Kathleen asked her to help pick out an engagement ring.
There was a lot of talk of marriage, even to the extent that Kathleen had bought Cody a ring and she was going to or getting ready to propose.
Seebacher was a friend, at least that's how Kathleen considered her, and so it made things very awkward.
But the situation grew even more awkward when Kathy confided that she was planning a romantic getaway with Cody to pop the question.
Kathleen wanted to go with Cody to Cancun on a holiday trip. And Cody says, "If Monique cannot go with me and you, I'm not going to Cancun." So Kathleen was forced into kind of taking Monique.
Coming up, it's a tropical vacation none of them would ever forget.
The three of them agreed to go as a group to Cancun, and that's when things really fell apart.
As Colorado detectives untangle the love triangle between Cody Boyd, Monique Seebacher, and Kathy Denson, they begin to realize that Kathy had plenty of motive to kill her former lover. But what would she have to say about her best friend's accusations?
We wanted to find out exactly what happened. What are the circumstances that led up to this, and what led you, the suspect, to shoot the person that ultimately died? And so that's what we were trying to do as far as interviewing Ms. Denson to get her side of the story to help put the pieces of this puzzle together.
Under interrogation by Colorado police, Kathy asks for her attorneys and gives them little. But friends present a slightly different story from Monique's.
Kathleen Denson struggled with cocaine use during the period of time that she was with Cody Boyd, and that was part of the problem with him. Everyone wants to be loved, and Cody Boyd convinced Kathleen Denson that he really, really loved her. More and more, Cody Boyd was not just asking for things like a Corvette or a Harley. He was insisting on Kathleen giving him huge sums of money. And that really opened her eyes to what he was really all about.
But drug use and extravagant spending weren't the only dangerous things about him.
He told her that he was a hitman and had killed 32 people and was a bad hombre.
Kathleen Denson was looking for love in the wrong place, because Cody Boyd was trouble from the get-go.
At first, Cody's bad boy act was a turn-on for Kathy. It wasn't until their trip to Cancun that she realized just how terrifying he could be.
If somebody is highly invested in being an outlaw or a bad boy, then citing gun ownership or citing violence that they may have perpetrated demonstrates to another person that they've attained this level of expertise or competence in their so-called domain.
Kathy financed the luxurious trip and says that when she agreed to bring Monique with them, she didn't know Cody had ulterior motives.
The trip to Cancun was between Monique, Cody, and Kathleen. And during that trip is when Kathleen had started to realize that there was a relationship going on between Cody and Monique.
She brought a ring to Cancun to propose marriage, and he had turned her down.
It would have been horrible to find out that your boyfriend, your lover, is with your best friend when you took them on vacation with you.
She could no longer deny or explain in her own mind the fact that she was really not the love object of Cody.
Once you discover that, you would feel betrayed.
But the trip had ended in far more than just a broken heart.
In Cancun, there was a heated argument, and according to Kathleen Denson, she was beaten up by Cody Boyd, flew back to Denver, and stayed basically in isolation because she didn't want to see anybody, and she didn't want anybody to see her blackened eyes and her very, very injured face.
She wanted things to work out between them. And instead, he started a relationship with her friend and with someone that worked for her. Someone who at some point in time was considered a confidant to her. And she had enough.
That was really the breaking point. That was the point of no return for Kathleen Denson.
When they returned to the U.S., Cody finally left the ranch and moved in with Monique. She was doing her best to move on from the betrayal when he unexpectedly showed up at her doorstep on June 27th.
On the day of the shooting, Kathleen Denson dropped her vehicle in town. She intended to take her 4Runner out on the road. She wanted to get some windshield time, some time for herself, and she enjoyed driving. When she got back to the ranch, it wasn't too long before Cody Boyd entered and began to threaten her.
Kathleen has said that he was trying to coerce her to give her another $300,000.
Fearing for her life, Kathy reached for something to defend herself with and wound up grabbing the antique pistol he'd given her. But in light of what they've learned so far, investigators find Kathy's version of events difficult to believe.
There were a number of different things that just didn't make sense in regards to what she was saying.
Cody was moving out his things from Kathleen's ranch and moving them into Monique's because he was going to live full-time with Monique. He didn't bring a weapon. He didn't have a gun.
On July 1st, 2002, 5 days after Cody's death, Eagle County prosecutors decide to formally charge Kathy Denson with second-degree murder.
This was the first homicide that I had investigated where there was this love triangle, and it just really muddies the water because there's so many different moving pieces.
I had concerns with a lot of people's credibility in the case. And that was an obstacle that we had to figure out, okay, what do we know versus what people exaggerate.
Coming up, the prosecution is betting that the evidence will prove their case. But will it be enough to get a conviction?
It was clear that she was a woman who was both terrified of the fact that she was charged with murder and horrified by the fact that she had had to commit murder.
"45-year-old millionaire Kathy Denson has been charged with murdering her ex-boyfriend Cody Boyd. If convicted, Kathy faces up to 48 years behind bars, but her attorneys seem confident she will be acquitted.
The prosecutors had an enormous burden. They had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kathleen Denson did not act in self-defense. And from my perspective, the deck was stacked in favor of the defense.
He entered the home angry, came at her, and she picked up the black powder gun that just happened to be in the room and shot him. And it ended up killing him.
Based on the evidence, however, prosecutors are convinced Kathy wasn't motivated by fear. She was out for revenge.
He wasn't grabbing your neck. He wasn't brandishing a heavy object. They were having a heated conversation. Does that give one a license to kill somebody because you have an argument in your house and you are able to shoot them dead in the middle of the afternoon?
We had to show that there was a reason for the murder, that there was motive. But then at the same time, we also had to show that this also was not justified murder.
Prosecutors say that evidence taken during a search of Kathy's ranch house supports their case.
There was drug paraphernalia in the residence. There were a lot of videos that we had to go through.
There was a video of them snorting some drugs, we presume cocaine.
What got more publicity was the exotic gun collection and these videotapes that Cody and Kathleen made of themselves engaged in various sexual activities.
There was no indication of any type of violence being used. It looked very consensual, very caring.
The prosecution believes Kathy was still desperately in love with Cody.
The picture that was being painted was that Kathleen was a scorned ex-lover. She was not happy with Mr. Boyd. She had given him all these things to try to win his love, and she was just very upset. And then he came back that day. Kathleen just couldn't stand the thought of Cody not being with her anymore.
And while Kathy claims that Cody had a history of violence, the truth is he'd been lying to her from the start.
Cody Boyd was known to say a number of different things, grandizing himself maybe more than what he really was. It was something to take note of, but there was absolutely no evidence that he was any type of mafia hitman or hitman at all.
I'm not aware of any prior criminal history on his part. I'm not saying he didn't have any, but if he did, it certainly wasn't significant enough to leave an impression on us.
One of his kinks was trying to get respect as a feared hitman when there was zero evidence to show he had anything to do with that.
Prosecutors argue that because Cody posed no actual threat, Kathy never had a reason to shoot him.
She had no injuries. There was no indication that she had been in a struggle or that she was in fear.
And interestingly, Kathleen never claimed. She said he kept coming at me. I was frightened. She never claimed there was any physical contact between the two.
And ballistics evidence from the scene appears to prove the distance between them.
When a gun fires, it creates stippling from the burning gunpowder. He had stippling from below his knees, on his pants, up on his face, to the top of his head. That means that the cone of burning gunpowder was in excess of 4 feet.
The prosecution noted that there were 2 doors that Kathleen could have fled out of instead of picking up the revolver and shooting the guy.
They believe that once Kathy had made her choice, her intent was clear: to kill the man who betrayed her.
Kathleen Denson was not a stranger to firearms, but was hardly an expert markswoman. At the distance that she had to fire that black powder pistol, it would have been hard to miss center mass, and that's what she aimed for.
She took a very drastic course of action for which there was no coming back.
However, Kathy sticks to her claim of self-defense, and her attorneys argue that it doesn't matter whether Cody presented any actual danger. For her, perception was reality.
Kathleen Denson really believed that Cody Boyd was a hitman, maybe in a prior life, or maybe even then. Mostly, she knew he was the kind of guy that wouldn't hesitate to hurt her. He'd already done it in Cancun.
Mr. Robinson's theory was clearly that Boyd was attacking her and was about to commit or had committed a crime against her.
Coming up, the defense's argument gets put to the test.
It was a self-defense case involving a woman who was scared to death of a man who was in her home. What defense lawyer wouldn't want a case like that?
Prosecutors in Eagle County, Colorado have finished arguing their case for murder. Now it's the defense's turn to convince the jury that Kathy Denson only shot Cody Boyd to save her own life. Their argument hinges on the state's home defense statute, known as the Make My Day Law.
Under that law, Kathleen Denson had a right to use deadly force, even if all that would have happened would be getting beaten up again by Cody Boyd. She didn't have to let him hurt her before she could use deadly force.
Over the course of their relationship, Cody had built himself up as a dangerous hitman, so Kathy had every reason to believe he would kill her.
He had military-style weapons. He had conversions of automatic and semi-automatic weapons. He had the large banana clips. He was everybody's nightmare in a world where mass shootings have become all too commonplace. An astronomical number of firearms were in the home.
Some of them were altered to be fully automatic weapons.
To prove their point, the defense makes a surprising move, asking Kathy to describe what happened in her own words.
Kathleen's attorney, Scott Robinson, put Kathleen on the stand, which is pretty unusual in a murder trial because, you could say something wrong and cook your own goose.
When Kathleen testified. She was impeccably dressed. Very attractive woman, very poised, articulate.
Appearance, dress, manner of speech, the way somebody wears their hair, the number of ums that they say. All of these things can impact jurors' perception of the credibility of a witness.
Kathy testifies that when Cody Boyd showed up at the ranch that day, he was enraged and also appeared to be high.
Cody Boyd had really wretched teeth, and Kathleen had agreed to pay for a complete restoration. Boyd was showed in the bill $20,000, and he was quite upset. She's immediately frightened because he looks crazed. He looks angry. He demands money.
One of the defense's pathologists did an autopsy on his own of Cody and found cocaine, and they found a sleep drug, I think halcyon, and they found, I think, THC from marijuana. And the pathologist said, these drugs could cause some people to get hostile.
He was in a drug-induced rage and was coming out hurt.
The fact that he claimed to have a darker past certainly played a factor.
The defense argues that whether Kathy intended to kill him or not, Cody had left her with little choice.
The defense felt that Mr. Boyd was coming down there, was being hostile and aggressive towards Miss Denson, and she felt no other recourse other than to defend herself.
Oftentimes, emotions will lead to immediate behavioral responses on people's parts. So there's no cooling off period. There's no time to think and to let the emotion calm down.
The timeline was easily established because he had just been at the dentist. We know exactly when the 911 call went in. So there really wasn't much of a delay between Boyd arriving at the ranch and Boyd receiving the fatal shot. Cody Boyd was high, he was angry, and he was going to go get what he had coming. Of course, as things turned out, he got exactly what he had coming.
But would the jury agree?
It was a very stone-faced jury. They were very hard to read.
The jury has a tough job to do. They're weighing somebody's life in their hands, and, they have to go with the information that was given here.
After only 2 hours, they return with their verdict. To the surprise of many, they find Kathy Denson not guilty.
The jury decided that she did not commit a crime, but it was a homicide. It was a death caused by another person.
Whether the jury acquitted Kathleen Denson because of the Make My Day statute or the self-defense statute or some combination of both, we'll never know.
Only 2 people were there that actually know exactly how it transpired. One of them was dead.
Everybody went home that day except for Cody.
It's a tragic case. It's tragic because I think a lot of people didn't feel that justice was served.
What began as the unlikely romance between a wealthy rancher and an itinerant cowboy has ended in betrayal and bloodshed. But the question remains, who is ultimately to blame?
Miss Seebacher, when she took the stand, there were a lot of inconsistencies with what she had said. So, it painted to the jury that she was not very credible, that, maybe she's a scorned person in this particular case. So I'm trying to seek revenge on Miss Denson.
The people who knew Kathleen Denson believed in her. There was no backlash. The impact on Kathleen Denson was a lot more subtle. Quite frankly, she has never gotten over the trauma of shooting and killing Cody Boyd.